Hope you're recovered from Dreamforce and that you're doing well. Our plan today is to talk about upgrading to the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3.0, the what, why, and how. And we're planning on spending more of our time on the how than on the what and the why. We will still talk about those, but we know that there's a lot of interest in sort of how to do this. So we want to give you guys as much information as we can on how to actually make this happen and how to make it work. So Caroline, can you go to the next slide?
Mm-hmm.
So these are our pictures since you can't see us. Caroline, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Caroline Renard. I'm in the Pacific Northwest, despite my accent, and most of my career was spent in arts management, and I specialise in working with arts organisations who are implementing Salesforce. I've been using Salesforce since 2008, and I am a Winter 14 MVP.
Okay, and your favorite feature is customizing household names. So my name is Ashima, and I've been using Salesforce for about as long as Caroline, and I enjoy helping organizations find peace with their data. I was a summer 2014 MVP, and I really like seasonal addresses. So we will talk a little bit about both of those, but we're going to spend more time on how to do the upgrade. So as I said before, we're going to talk about what the Nonprofit Starter Pack is, why you would want to upgrade, when to upgrade, then of course how, and we're planning on giving you some resources as well. Now this session is being recorded. We'll provide you a link, but this link will also be publicly shared. So if for whatever reason you want to remain anonymous, you may maintain silence, and you can chat questions as well. So Caroline, why don't you talk about what the Nonprofit Starter Pack has today?
So the Nonprofit Starter Pack, as you probably know, because I'm sure most of you on the call already use it, is actually 6 packages in all: contacts and organizations, households, recurring donations, relationships, affiliations, and batch data entry. And they were last substantially revised, I think, in about 2009, 2010. So this is, they've basically gone back and done a kind of complete reworking of aspects of all of these different packages, and also done some rebranding. So I think I'm going to start just very quickly with saying what hasn't changed, or what doesn't change when you upgrade. There's a lot of things that, as I said, there are a lot of things that have changed, but when you do the upgrade, there are things in your instance that won't change. Or the settings and the processes that you currently have, your field and page layouts, your data, those things are not going to change. There'll be a lot in the when you've upgraded that will look extremely familiar. And we put this slide in partly because I'd had a question from a lot of my clients which said, oh, does it mean I have to export everything out of my Salesforce instance and start all over again? And the answer is no. Much of it will look very familiar to you. And the other thing that hasn't changed is the Nonprofit Starter Pack name. I think this is less relevant now, but when they were developing, it was codenamed Cumulus, and everybody thought that maybe that meant the name of the package was going to change. But there are good things that have changed. Do you want to tell them, Ashima?
Sure. So one of the, I think one of the big things that's changed is this installation. All packages are now installed with one install rather than having to do 6 separate installs. And the positive part about that now is that these updates are going to happen automatically. So you're not going to have to go out and, whereas before you had to upgrade and look and see what version changes there were. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't do that. But now you're not going to have to because updates are going to get pushed out by the foundation. All of the settings as well are now under one tab, including any of the error messages that you might have gotten that show you, problems that you might be having. The big thing I think that's awesome resource for all of you that you should all definitely be looking at is the health check, which basically allows you to see if there's data that might need to be fixed in your instance. So if there is a problem with your instance of Salesforce or with any of your data, you would definitely be able to use the health check to check that out. So something you should definitely look at as a tool. We'll show you that as well. And then, of course, the documentation has been improved and much better. We'll show you some of the resources as well there. So, Caroline, can you get the next slide? This stuff that has changed that is kind of more under the hood. Maybe it's not as big a deal to you right now, and you may not benefit from them right now, but it's good to know. So the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 is fully compatible with Salesforce 1, meaning that it's mobile. So you can actually take your phone or any of your, iPad or anything else that you want, and you're able to use Salesforce with the app, which is really, really helpful for those that are on the go. And then also the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 is much more developer friendly. So especially if you engage a developer to build some customizations for your instance of Salesforce, they're going to find it easier to figure out what's coded within the nonprofit, the new starter pack, and then it'll also be easier for them so that it doesn't interfere with kind of how that system works. So things like Click and Pledge or Soapbox Engage that have built integrations, their systems are going to work even better with the Starter Pack 3. And dupe detectors that are out there will work much better with the Starter Pack 3. So there's some positives around this change as well.
But the main changes that I think you're going to see are in the contacts and orgs part, or contacts and organizations and household parts of Nonprofit Starter Pack 3. So one of the things that one of us said that we really liked is that you can be much more flexible about how you name your households. If you've used households in the Nonprofit Starter Pack at the moment, you're pretty much limited to naming them based on the last name. So you can end up with an awful lot of Smith households, or in this part of the country, we end up with a lot of Lee households. But now you can choose that and you can be more flexible. And when we come to the demo, we'll show you how you can vary how you name the household. So you can include your first name and last name, or salutation and last name, or both last names. You can select a primary contact in the household, which I think is a really useful feature. I mean, a lot of my clients used to do this anyway. They used to build a custom field that was kind of the head of the household, or the primary contact. Now this is created for you automatically based on the first person that you put into the household. There's a new Salesforce feature which has just recently been released, which includes middle names and suffix fields for names. Now, a lot of people already have customizations to do that, but the good thing about the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 is that it will support anyone who's using the new default Salesforce fields. So that means that when names are being automatically created, for example, for one-to-one accounts, or in the households as well, you can opt to include the middle name if you wish. And the other one that I like is designating a primary affiliation. So if you use affiliations to show the association that contacts have with different organizations, you can pick which is the primary, not only for them, but also for the organization itself. So if there is somebody and you know that a particular person is your main contact, or the main way you want to, you have the main relationship that you have with that person based for that organization, again, you can designate that that's primary. And all of those features are available even if you stick with the account model that you currently have. So if you're using the individual bucket model, or you're using the one-to-one account model, you can still use all of these Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 features. But one of the biggest changes to Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 is that you now have the choice of a third account model. So as I've just said, you may already be using the individual bucket model or the one-to-one account model, but what's now been added is this new household account model, which is now for Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 the default. And it's actually much closer to the standard way that Salesforce works. So bear with me for a few minutes while I do some quick basics, which I hope will help people understand how this new account model works. So as I always say to my clients, Salesforce was built as a business-to-business tool. And so in classic Salesforce, everyone has to belong to some company or business. They have to belong to an account. And every contact has to be associated with an account in some way. And that's important because every opportunity, that is donation or sale of a ticket or miscellaneous payment, also has to be associated with an account. If you think opportunity was basically built for big business deals, the sorts of things that you're going to usually be doing in Salesforce with a company. And the way that you associate that gift of money or sale with a contact is via something called the contact role. Now, of course, in the nonprofit world, we're normally dealing with individuals. So we had to try and figure out some way of turning the account to represent an individual. And there were two ways to do it. One was to have one big account that was just the individual buckets. And the other way was to have this idea of this one-to-one or hidden account that sat behind the contact. And then there was the issue of what do you do if your contacts belong into households. And what the Nonprofit Starter Pack used to do was to create this separate object off to the side to represent households. But you can already see that this presents a bit of a challenge because because now if somebody gives a gift, it's directly associated with a one-to-one account, which is hidden, and that's then associated with a contact. And then there's this indirect relationship to the contact via the contact role, and then the households sit off at the side somewhere and add an extra layer in reporting. So what the household account model does is to bring this back together again. And it says, okay, instead of having one-to-one accounts or an individual bucket account, why don't we make the account represent the household? And now you see we've gone back to this rather simpler Salesforce structure. So if you swap to the household account model, you end up getting some really good benefits.
Yeah, so Caroline sort of explained, we moved from the traditional Salesforce model to this sort of morphed model back now to our traditional model, which is what Salesforce was all about. And so now we can, report a lot easier with households and organizations because they're at the same level. And we have some new functionality like auto-syncing, addresses between accounts and households. There's this really great functionality that I've already mentioned to you guys about having seasonal addresses that I'm very excited about, multiple addresses, so not even just seasonal, but other kinds of addresses. There is also address verification that's available now. I think, Caroline, aren't there 3 different address verification apps that are available that interface with the starter pack?
I think what they've done is they've kind of opened it up so that there are the hooks for people to link up with services, and yes, there are about 3 that are recommended.
Yep. And so, address verification essentially is the ability to have this third party that, gets connected with the post office and can update your, addresses for you, so you don't have to do it yourself. It can be automated. And then the new roll-ups that are available for household members. So these functions are only available with this household account model, which we will talk about how that would work as well.
And the other thing you can do with the address verification is you could actually use it with Google Mapping, so you can actually use it for locations as well, I believe.
Yeah, geolocation. Absolutely.
So I think we should just dive into an org and show some of these things off, don't you?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. And Beth did ask a question about the deduping, and that I answered. So hopefully all you guys saw that about dupe blocker. So it is pretty exciting, Beth. We're all yipping about that too. Yay! All right. So
okay. So I'm going to, while we shift Ashima to Ashima is going to run the demo. So we'll shift presenters. Does anyone else have any quick questions about the introduction before we move on?
You can type in your questions as we go too. So I try to answer while Caroline's talking, and she tries to answer while I'm talking, so it helps.
So I think, Ashima, right. we mentioned those settings in one tab. Shall we start there?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, so I'm going to click on the nonprofit starter pack settings, and this is the fun part, right, Caroline? I mean, this is kind of what's so cool about it, and we talked a little bit about why things were where they were. This really is less focused on it being what developers would use, and more focused on you as users and where you would want to find things. So when you're talking about the account model you want to use, it's under people, and households and address verification and leads. The foundation took some energy and time into really figuring this piece out. So is there one we want to talk about in particular, Caroline?
Let's show people where you set the account model, and let's look at, and can we look at that household naming just quickly as well?
Yeah, let's do that. Okay. So right here under people, you'll see there's the account model, and if we click on edit under account model, you'll see that I can actually change when you switch over. So if you have a one-to-one, it'll actually say one-to-one on it. We happen to actually convert this particular account over to the household, so that's why it's under a household account. So this is what's nice about it. It's real easy to switch, and simple to find as well. So that's where you find your account model. So under people, account model. And then we have our households here. So we've got the ability to rename households. So right now we have a format of last name and then household. We could include first name in this as well if we wanted. We could include a lot of different things in the household name format. We could change it from being household to something else. That's entirely, like here's last name with family, first name and last name with family. You can also create your own. So if you wanted to have your own format, you could come in here and make changes. So if I wanted to change this to group, I could do that. So this is entirely up to you as to what you want to do with your household name. Is there anything you want to talk about specifically, Caroline, here?
No, I think let's just let's carry on and create a new contact.
Okay. So let's go to a contact, and we're going to create a new contact. And as I said, we've already converted this over to the household model. So I'm going to just create Robin's account. And, again, similar, you just type in your first name and your last name, just like we had before, and click on Save. And when I go to click Save, you'll notice that my account name is now the Smith household. So you see, I don't actually get a household anymore. We kept this field in here because we wanted you to see the change that has happened. So it's no longer creating a household, it's creating an account with the Smith household name, right? And you'll also see here that this Robin Smith is our primary contact within the Smith household. All right, so now what happens if we want to Oh,
So
and
would you
yeah,
like to create do you want to create a new contact that is in the household? Oh, are you going to give Robin an address?
yeah, right. I totally forgot to give Robin an address. She needs an address. Okay. So let's give her a mailing street.
This is really because we want to show you how everything will sync up later.
Oh, I was going to do Over the Woods. Oh, well.
Oh, that was going to be their vacation place, wasn't it?
Oh, right. Exactly. Thank you
This is
for
fine.
reminding me. So we've created, now we have an address for her, 123 Main Street.
Mm-hmm.
So now what we want to do is we want to actually create another person in the household, right, Rob?
Absolutely.
For her. So you'll notice here now the address for Robin carried over to her household, which is helpful. And then we're going to go ahead and create a new contact. And we'll call this John. All right, so you notice the account name is the Smith household.
Can we give him a different name just to show what happens?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, different last name, right?
Yeah, give him a different last name.
Good idea. Okay. Let's give it Jones. So now we're in the Smith and Jones household, and you'll see the address. Again, we talked a little about the address kind of carrying over from the different, from the household, from the account, so it's all consistent. And also notice that John is not the primary contact, and that's because I created Robin first. I did not create John first, but I can always switch this if I need to.
Beth asked if it's easy, if you can actually set the household name based on just one of the people in the household. I believe actually that is a little tricky. The most of the household naming, I think, is based on the first and last names of all of the members of the household. But I think they're working on that as a future release, because there have been people who've asked, how do you do that?
Yep.
And how can you set it? Particularly for greetings, I think people want like Mr. and Mrs. And just the first name. So not available right now, Beth, but is coming.
And you can do naming exclusions. Again, that's, it's not automated. You do have to go into each person and exclude them from the account or the household name. You can exclude them from the formal and the informal greeting as well. But it's not an automated thing. You have to go in and exclude that particular contact from those. So that's also another way to do what you're talking about. But you're right. Caroline's correct. There's no way to do that right away. The way that it is.
Or not kind of globally for everybody.
Right. So
how about go on.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to suggest what we might do next, but I think we're probably thinking alike.
Yeah. So what if we want to, John is no longer in this household. He's moved out of this household and he's now in a different household. So we'll say that he's in, he's in the Monroe and Brown household. All right, so I'm going to go to the Monroe and Brown household, and we're going to, there's probably multiple ways to do this. I'm picking this way to move him. So I'm going to click on Edit, and some of you might remember this layout from our previous version of the Nonprofit Startup Pack. And I'm going to move John from, Jones. I'm going to add him to this household, and it's going to say to me, now he's already in a household, so do you want to add him to this one, or and remove him from the old one, or merge? Sort of what do you want to do? So I'm going to say add and remove from old household. And then I'm going to go ahead and you'll notice the address changes too. I'm going to go ahead and save his record, and you'll notice the household name changes, the greetings change, everything sort of changes for this particular household. And then if I go back to Robin's household, you'll see that'll change as well. Now just the Smith household. So there's a lot of built-in functionality here. So what's the next thing we can share?
And Carly has just asked about what we recommend doing with the old household object. We will remind us, Carly, we'll come back to that. At the moment, we have some of this data still in this instance, and we'll talk a bit more about it when we get later in the webinar. Yep. But thank you for the question, and yep. I notice it. So the other thing we thought we might show, because you said you really liked this, is the seasonal addresses.
Oh, right. My addresses. I do love my seasonal addresses. They make me so happy. So we can actually create multiple addresses for a household. So if, for example, this entire group of folks move from one location to another, we are able to make additional addresses. So maybe they go on vacation and they go over the woods to Grandma's house. And that happens to be in Michigan. And we can pick what kind of addresses. So this is their vacation residence. And we have a start date. So when do they start going to Grandma's house, and then when do they end?
Oh, they're lucky. They go in May. They get a long summer.
So we're gonna set the date so that it ends after, so you can actually see the date change. So we're gonna go ahead and click save, and then when we look at the record, you'll see now our address for the Smith household has changed over the woods to Grandma's house. And they are actually in the vacation residence. So we're no longer in our, sorry, I'm in the wrong place. I should go to the Smith household to show you that. Over the wood to Grandma's house, and that's the address that's being used. When we hit that November, let's see, where is that November date I picked? I don't have that in my related list. So November 5th or whatever it was, the day after that will be the date. It will switch back to this default address here, the 123 Main Street in Lansing.
So this the dates are really useful. The dates are really useful if you have somebody who regularly goes to a different address and spends part of the year, and you know that that's what happens. You can also use this address feature for, even if you don't know the dates on which it switches, you can just use it to have multiple addresses for people. So yes, you can customize the address type field, as Rena's just asked. There is in fact, I added one yesterday. Did you see I added a mailing address there, Ashima? Because I've come across there are organizations, because in some cities and jurisdictions, if there are a lot of post office boxes, sometimes you have to mail to people's post office box addresses, but you also want to know their street address. So you could actually really easily use this to have a mailing address for people and then a street address, and then you could build a report which is the households with addresses, and select which of the addresses you wanted to use in order to send your mailing. Yep. So yes, that's perfectly possible, and this does make this very flexible. Mm-hmm. Oh, and I see. Are you going back to their main address, or just? Mm-hmm.
Well, I added the mailing address for her, and you notice that I didn't put a seasonal date or anything. It's just in here now. Like Caroline said, we could run a report to get all of the mailing addresses, and then we could mail to that, which is really helpful, right? Instead of having to figure out which address we want to send it to. All right. So, do we have any questions so far?
I'm keeping an eye on the questions. Okay. I know we didn't talk about this yesterday, but We link to an organization called individual. Okay. Well, I think of the answer to your question, Jerry. If you could look up, Ashima, the Good Foundation.
I can do that.
Yeah, just G-O-O-D.
There we go. Good Foundation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I just wanted to show on that, and I know it's on slightly the wrong account layout, but if you look at the affiliated contacts, there is a lady there, Sarah, who is a trustee, and she is there as the primary affiliation. Yes. And if you click on her contact record, you'll see that the organization that she's affiliated with is automatically, as soon as she was selected as the primary affiliation with that organization, then it appears on her contact record.
Yep. Yeah. Those primary affiliations are nice, aren't they?
Yeah. So,
in some ways, it's like two affiliations, two different ways that we can communicate with her with two different, depending on the role she is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's a little confusing there that there's an account name and a household. The household is legacy. We haven't deleted all of the old households yet, so that's why it's duplicated.
Yeah, good point. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we have a question, Ashima, that from Jerry, which is he says that when a person is not associated to an organization, e.g. where they work, we link to an organization called individual and the impact with 3.0. So the way that that the foundation is now recommending that you use this is that you do take advantage of the household functionality, so that if you do have actually everybody ends up associated with some kind of organization, but in the majority of cases, the organization is going to be their household, and so that everyone is created with a household, and then you use the affiliations object and the primary affiliation to link to where they work, to associate them with where they work. Mm-hmm. So, in fact, I mean, there are two answers to your question. One is that if you wished to continue to use the model that you have now and have everybody in an individual account, it's perfectly possible to do that. You can upgrade to Nonprofit Starter Pack 3. You'll get some of the new functionality, or you'll be able to use the updates and all that kind of thing. And you can stick with your individual model. But some of these other features, like the seasonal addresses and some of the things we've just been showing you, won't be available to you unless you decide to shift and put everybody in a household.
Right, exactly. All right. You're welcome, Jerry.
And I think, I think just one more thing quickly, because I think we have a moment or two, is that, and in fact, maybe Ashima, there are 3 reports that I created yesterday. If you look in, they're in unfiled public reports. There was just a couple of things I thought, some of the things that you and I had been talking about. One of them is that it makes household mailing so much easier. Because, one of the things that I think people used to struggle with, particularly with the one-to-one accounts, was how do you create mailing reports? Do you start with contacts? Do you start with households? How do you make sure that you're not getting duplicates and things? I think one of the things that the household model makes so much easier is there's really no dispute now about where you should build a report for a mailing list, because your households are all accounts, so you just build a straightforward account report.
Account report.
Yeah.
Using this account record type equals household account.
Yeah. And because of this primary contact feature, you can actually show the main contact in each household now as part of that account report, which is something that was a little more complicated to do before.
Yep. Yeah, this is much better.
Yeah. And I think that I think that primary contact is also very useful if you're doing an opportunities or a donations report, because again, you don't need to figure out all the contact role stuff, do you? You could actually build a simple report on opportunities and include the primary contact field. It's now available to you. That's the other report. I did a donations with households report.
Let's take a look. There we go. Are you seeing this now?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
So yeah, it's interesting. Some of these reports that always used to be a little tricky, trying to figure out how the contacts fitted into this. Some of these reports now, I think, just get simpler, as we said before, using the household account model.
And you could pull addresses in, and you could pull all kinds of information in from that account. So that's we're going. I think the key that Caroline pointed out is we're going back to the original model that Salesforce is built on, instead of creating this sort of custom object that sat out. We're going back to the standard way. So reporting is a lot easier because of that.
And my understanding, Beth, is that you do get, Beth has asked, do we get report types with the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 install, so that there are kind of standard reports for Nonprofit Starter Pack 3? And my understanding is, yes, there are. There's a bunch of canned reports that are available. The slightly tricky thing is that, unfortunately, all of the older report types are also there as well. So part of the sort of tidying up is you have to go and hide the ones that you won't be using anymore, the ones that were the version 2. Aren't they? That's right. Yeah. That I mean, we'll get onto this a bit more in the how, I think, won't we, Ashima? But it's actually the tidying up afterwards is the time-consuming bit.
And you probably will run into things even after you thought you tidied it all up. You'll run into other things. So just accept it. It will happen. You'll do your best, right?
So I think the answer to your question, Beth, is no, you don't necessarily have to update reporting layouts, because there will be new reporting layouts available. But what is going to take the time is basically going and kind of tidying up and hiding the old report types so that users don't get confused.
Right, exactly. Are there other reports you want to show, Caroline?
Those were the ones I did, so it's fine.
Okay, all right. Well, let's get back to the why so that we can get to the how, right?
Absolutely. Okay. All right.
All right, so we'll make you presenter.
Okay.
Great.
So that's kind of our what section, and now we'll talk a little bit about the why. I think we've covered a lot of these points already, but some of these are, I think, key. As Ashima mentioned, once you have upgraded to Nonprofit Starter Pack 3, you'll hopefully never need to do an upgrade again, because the new features and settings will be pushed out automatically to you. We think that it makes it easier now to get online help and access to more documentation. Obviously, the new settings tab is a lot more user-friendly. It's easier to understand the errors because of the health check, which we're going to show you some more screenshots of. And you can customize your household names, and you don't need to change your existing data. And then there's the reasons why you might want to change to the household account model.
I think we've talked about these, right?
Absolutely. So a lot of this we've already covered. This is kind of your summary if you need this to go and show to somebody else. Though there's only one small point about this saving data storage. I realized when we wrote this, Ashima, that we hadn't really thought about the implication of addresses. So one of the reasons why it saves data storage is because particularly if you're using the one-to-one account model, you have at the moment for every contact, you also have the mirror account, and then you have the household. Now, you're going to take away the one-to-one accounts, so that will help because then you'll just have contacts and households. But if you start using the seasonal address field, and particularly if you start having multiple addresses for people, then unfortunately it's almost like putting the one-to-one accounts back because you're going to have additional objects. So yes, in theory it should save you data storage, but it might create another issue.
It's true. That's a good point.
Anyway.
We thought we were clever.
It took somebody from the foundation to point that out to me, that's a problem. Anyway. But there are of course reasons why you might want to stay with your current account model. Data storage may indeed be one of them. I've also come across people who have a lot of customizations that rely on the one-to-one relationship or an integration that's based on this model. I have a client that does a very complex imports data via a complicated process. We kind of have to have the one-to-one accounts there because that's how the whole thing's been built up. And so it would be pretty tricky to change. You may, of course, be an organization that deals mostly with organizations, or you have very few households. Again, I would think carefully about whether you really need all the functionality around the household model. If you're already using the individual bucket model, because most of your contacts are organizations, you may not need to change account models at all. And if you only use parts of the nonprofit starter pack, that is, maybe you only use recurring donations or you just use relationships and affiliations, and I know there are plenty of organizations out there who do that, then you're not going to be able to upgrade. If you want to use those individual packages, you'll have to keep using the old versions. So what do you think, Ashima? How would we tell people about when to upgrade?
So, I think if you're not changing your account and data model at all, you're sticking with the one-to-one or the individual, or like Caroline said, you don't even use, you just, you're in the individual, or I just use some of those tools. You probably could update now, and again, while help and support is active, it makes a lot of sense. It will take a few hours for you to upgrade. I always tell people to plan at least half a day. And really try to focus your energy as much as you can on doing the upgrade, not doing like 5 other things while you're doing the upgrade. All I'm sending email, really focus on doing that and really carving out time for that. It could take you less time. I'd say if it does take you less time, then take some time to read some of the documentation that's available to you. It is a helpful thing to do. Now, if you do want to change your data model, I would wait a little bit until you have at least a full day to upgrade. I actually did this upgrade of the instance we have that we're using very quickly, so it didn't take me a full day. It took me about 2 hours to do, but our data isn't very complex. I would say give yourself as much time as possible. I did not do tidying up, as you can see. I still have my old household fields. I still have all my one-to-one contacts. I still have all of that. So I think there's a lot of post-installation work I didn't do. So you definitely give yourself time. All that data is going to have to migrate over to this account household now. So there's some things you want to do. It's completely doable. You're not going to struggle with it. And if you have had experience with manipulating Salesforce data or importing data yourself, you won't have any trouble with moving the household data into the account household. However, if you haven't and you feel like you need some help, then please ask for help, because that's an important step that you don't want to miss. So again, I think upgrading the nonprofit starter pack without changing your data model, do it. If you're thinking, I want to change my data model, I'd say wait just a little bit for for things to be ironed out. If you're feeling confident, do it. As I said, the process that I went through was really easy. So it's not the conversion as much as it is the post cleanup. And then of course, definitely give yourself the time you need to get it done correctly. Really don't do multiple things while you're doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting. I think as more people are converting, they're kind of coming up with more questions. So if you're happy to be an early adopter and you want to be part of the conversation and maybe influence what happens next, then by all means make the conversion and be part of that conversation. If you'd kind of rather wait until other people have figured things out, then I would wait. Beth asked a question about the batch data entry tool, which was part of the the batch data entry tool, which was one of the nonprofit starter pack packages. Mm-hmm. There are, when you do the upgrade, you will end up with two versions of it. There is the old version and there's the new version. And the new version, the one in the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3, David Habib did a wonderful job of tidying it up and incorporating the settings into kind of standard Salesforce custom settings. It used to be a little bit difficult, a little bit tricky to configure the batch data entry for which fields you wanted to appear. And so David's done a great job of tidying that up. Unfortunately, he's only tidied it up for contacts, accounts, and opportunities. So if you want to use the batch data entry for a custom object, you're going to have to use the old version. That came up in a conversation in the hub, and I was going, hang on a minute, I actually have a client who uses batch data entry all the time with a custom object called assignments. And David went, oh, I'm sorry, I haven't done custom objects yet. So so that's what I mean by if you're a big batch data entry user, you may find when you upgrade, you have to use the old version for some things and the new version for others. Right. The other one that you end up with two versions of is the contact merge tab. And apparently there is no difference at all between the two. So just pick whichever one you come to first. Okay.
And the other thing is join, if you aren't already a member of the group on the Power of Us Hub, the nonprofit, I think they call it beta maybe, Nonprofit Starter Pack
beta testing, group. Yes.
Yes, beta testing. Even if you're not upgrading your instance right now, it's a good group to join to read about things that people are finding or doing. Like Caroline said, she's figured things out based on that. David and Kevin and Nicholas and a whole bunch of other developers for the foundation are actively looking at that group and commenting. So it's a really good spot to go to really understand how the Nonprofit Starter Pack works, how 3.0 works, what things, functionality is available. Again, even if you're not upgrading, I think it's a good thing to join.
So let's talk in a little more detail about how you do the conversion, because that's, I think, where a lot of these issues have come up. And yes, that will give the Yeah, absolutely. Rena has just published a link to a workbook, which we'll show you a bit of, which is really helpful. So
you're right, it is very helpful.
Maybe we should swap this resources slide in first. But anyway, so if you're just going to do the basic upgrade and you're not going to convert to household models, I'm going to talk about that, and then Ashima is going to talk about how you do the migration. I guess it's more than two. It's two stages to this process. But in every case, always start by creating a sandbox and trying this out in a sandbox first. And in fact, the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 install tool actually specifically asks you to do this in a sandbox first. And then there's a set of post-install steps, one of the main things to do is to run one of these health checks. So I'll just go quickly. I've got a few screenshots of kind of how it looks like. We didn't really want to do this in a real demo in case something went wrong in a live demo. So I think one of the differences between how you may have installed things in the past and how you do it now is that you don't go to the App Exchange. This will change in the future, but at the moment, because this is all pretty new, you actually need to look for the documentation that's linked to the Power of Us Hub, and you go to a separate installer page, which is not part of the App Exchange. And as you'll see, they actually say this works for sandboxes as well as production and developer editions. And so, in fact, it's the same link. When you go to install in your sandbox, you'll go to the installer page, and then when you come back later to put it into production, you'll again go to this same installer page. And the installer page takes you through a series of steps, but this is one of the first ones screens you'll see, which is requesting your permission to access information and to do the installing. So you want to click allow for that. And then the installer this time checks to see what you've got first. The type is a little small here, but basically it runs through this quick process just to make sure what you've already got installed and what's going to upgrade and which bits of it will then need to install, because there are a few extra little bits and pieces that get put in as well as the packages being upgraded. So it runs a sort of check for you first. And then just so that they can confirm that you're installing into the organization that you plan to install into, you are required to retype the Salesforce username. It confused me a little bit the first time I got to this screen, because actually the username is there and you think, oh, that's fine, I can just click install. But no, you have to retype it as a confirmation that you're going to the right place. Mm-hmm. And then as the install is happening, you see the progress of it. So this is one which is halfway through. And at this stage, contacts and organizations and households have succeeded, but I still have a few more bits to go. And this is going to be one of the places where you're really going to tell pretty quickly if you have problems or not. You can hit errors here with the installation, can't you, Ashima? And I think a lot of those tend to be with, a lot of the errors seem to come up if you have validation rules or required fields or some other customization that is kind of preventing all of the nonprofit starter pack functionality from working.
Right.
Is there anything you've come across particularly that is worth pointing out?
You know, I have had no trouble installing, but I've been reading a lot of errors that have been coming up. So I think if you run across something and you cannot figure it out, that's a good place to go, right? Go to the group and type in exactly the error you got and in what package you got it in. So, you know, it was working, it got to the affiliations 2.0, and I got an error saying this. And then at least the guys that are the developers can figure out what's going on with that.
And it's important. Yes, and really, the most likely place that you'll have a problem is on the contacts and accounts. It shouldn't. The nonprofit starter pack should ignore all of the custom objects. It's really just the ones that are specific to the nonprofit starter pack, and the most likely problems are going to be somewhere on your contact or your account records.
Right.
So if the installation happens and it succeeds, and then you go in and you run a health check. If your health check was great and you haven't changed anything, if the setup and the install was good and you haven't changed any settings, you should get a nice green, lots of greens on your health check. But you may get some errors. Do you want to talk a little bit about this error screen?
Sure. So the errors, they actually here will tell you more information about your data. So in like the account model data right now, it's telling us that we had the account model set to household account, but you don't just have household accounts, right? You have one-to-one accounts and household accounts. So the question is, which one are you? Because you've got one-to-one and you've got household accounts. We also have a household object that has no contacts in it, so that's, why do you have that there? So it's, again, this is just data issues that you have that even when you're running Salesforce and using your system regularly, you might want to come in here periodically and do, not just when you're installing it or when you're updating it, it's when you're maybe trying to figure out what problems there might be with your instance. So this is definitely a helpful tool in helping you detect what's happened. So, if I were a detective wearing my hat saying, oh, you know what, I think this organization might have actually moved to the household account model, and they have household accounts, but for whatever reason, they still kept their one-to-one accounts as well. So maybe it's an opportunity for us to get rid of those household accounts or one-to-one individuals, sorry. So that's sort of the idea behind this health check.
And and when I tried it, I have to say I got that same recurring donations one. What was it? Something about the installment period pick list is not valid.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
So.
Yep.
But that was my only error.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately.
So right, you have a custom, but you don't have a custom installment period. So again, these are there's more than just these errors that it can find. There's a lot of errors that it can find. So it's helpful for you to run this on a fairly regular basis to see how your data is looking.
But just to emphasize again, everything that we've shown you so far, you don't have to change your account model at all in order to do all of this. All of this upgrade can happen and can be fine. And if you to go back to Jerry's question, if you're using the individual bucket model, then your organization could pass the health check just fine, and it would say your account model is the bucket individual and you have this number of accounts and you don't have the other ones, and it would pass because that's your setup and you're using the setup correctly. So all of this this is just the upgrade, and you have to do this anyway, whether you're going to change your account model or not.
Yes. And Beth, if you do change the account model, the nonprofit starter pack does not delete your one-to-one account. Now, we're going to get to that too. So I want to let you know we're going to talk about that post after you change.
So, do you want to talk about how you change?
Yes, so let's talk about the updating. So first, before I talk about the conversion, well, no, we were going to talk about that later. Okay, never mind. Caroline, I've got my notes before about the sandbox, but we're going to do that afterwards. So what you do to convert is you use this utility, and you'll see that it's highlighted here, to convert your data. And you take your instance of Salesforce. So you'll see, like, there's an example down here at the bottom. Yours might be na17.salesforce.com, or it's whatever where your instance resides. Basically, it's the server, the North American server that you reside on. you add to the end of it /APAC/ and then NPSP account conversion. So that's the first step you take.
So actually, the first step is you need to change. You should follow through their instructions carefully, shouldn't you? And change the account model first. And
first change the account model. Yes.
Yeah.
And you'll see. So there are actually a few steps to take before, but I show you an error of what happens if you don't change one. Absolutely, Caroline. Thank you for reminding me. The first step is changing your account model. Then you do the account. You basically are changing you're saying, I want to run this conversion tool. So the next slide, I think, shows the error, right?
Yeah.
So this is very important. This is, unfortunately, one easily skipped because I did with one of the instances I converted. This error shows up. And it is really the intention of this is to tell you that you don't have access to the household account record type with your profile. So really the first two steps are convert your setting so that your setting is now household accounts. Any new accounts or any new contacts that get created will have a household account. Second is to add the household account record type to your current profile. Now, I would say add it to all the profiles that you're using because obviously other people are going to be creating households and they need access to that record type. So that sort of explains how to do it, but basically you go into your profile and you add, there's a spot where you can change your record types and which record types you have access to are available to your profile. So don't skip this step. It's an important one. So then
there's a lot of small print, isn't there?
Yes.
But there's a lot of boxes to check.
They really want you to read all of these, so that's why they have check boxes there. Of course, I just went through and checked them all. But basically, what they're saying is make sure that you have everyone's logged out. You don't want to do this with people in your instance adding data right now because it could cause problems. You want to back up your data, and you can back up your data by going to set up data management, export data. Hopefully all of you are already doing that. You do want to test this in a sandbox, and we'll talk about that in a bit. You want all your record ownerships to be transferred from inactive users. So there's a whole slew of things you want to do before you convert to the household account model. Read all of these carefully. I love the last one is I accept the risk associated with using this tool, including data loss and inconsistent data. Because basically what they're saying is they're going to muck around with your data and they're automating that process. So something could go wrong, which is this whole idea of doing it in the sandbox first. So yes, read the small print. So you might remember I mentioned this earlier that you might have customized your household object. So this is the old version, right? You had households, and you maybe add some custom field to the household object. So what's happening when you do this conversion is it's copying what was in the household object into this new account. It's not copying all those fields. It's just copying the standard fields over. So if there are any custom fields that you want to move over into your new account household, you will want to have the old ID for that household, because what that'll allow you to do is export everything out of the household object, all your custom fields, and then import all of that data into your account household, and it will be able to find that ID for the old household within your account. So that's really the key of why you need to have this account field. And if you haven't customized households, this is not an issue for you. But if you have, then you definitely want to create a field on the account that will hold the old household ID. Then when you're done, you can get rid of the households, but that's after you've done actually done the move over. Once it's been successful and everything has been converted, this is what you will see. Basically, it says it succeeded. All of your accounts have now been converted over. You're now in the household account model, and you definitely want to follow. There's a post-installation checklist that walks you through things you need to do, as well as the upgrade workbook that I think Rena linked to. We also have a link in this presentation as well. So your conversion's complete now. That's just basically what I did. It took me about an hour to do just the conversion and making sure that I had everything set up right. And then I did not do any of my post-install stuff. Well, I did a few things, but I didn't do everything because we were just wanting to show you the basics.
But we did want to show you this and not to get worried about this version of the health check.
These are normal errors that you will see. We run every time you do something like this, like when you do, like Caroline said, when you do the nonprofit starter pack upgrade to 3.0, run the health check. Read what it says. Try to understand what it's saying. Same thing here. Run the health check. So what this again is saying is that you're similar to what we saw first time, right? You're set to household account. You're a mixture of, it looks like you're using a mixture because you've got some one-to-one accounts, but you also have household accounts. So that makes sense, right? I just upgraded. It did not delete. So I think, Beth, you asked this. It does not get rid of my one-to-one accounts. So that's something I need to think about. Also, I still have my 153 households that have no contacts in it. So because everyone got moved over to my household account. So that's what I'm seeing here. This is normal. This is not a bad error. But we do want to deal with these. We want to figure out what to do because what we do want to get is no errors. So this is normal after conversion, but not something we want to live with.
So I'm actually, if I just adjust this, we talked quickly. There is a lot of documentation here, and this is linking to the general nonprofit starter pack documentation, and there is a post-upgrade checklist and a post-install checklist. But Judy Sohn and Trish Perkins put together an upgrade workbook, which is a lot more detailed and has lots more. This is the link that you posted, Rena, and it has lots of screenshots and all sorts of really helpful stuff. So this is this has a whole section about if you want to stay with your previous account model and a section about if you convert. But there are all these little tiny things like view overrides and custom fields and putting fields on layouts and things like that, which it's really useful that somebody's written all this down because actually there's lots of it, isn't it?
Yeah. Right, exactly. Someone already spent the time to think through it. So this is really where you're going to spend the bulk of your time, is in this cleanup phase. So sort of making sure that you've cleaned up everything and you're ready to use the household account model. Again, not something you want to do, with an hour spare. You really want to take your time with it. And as it said, you don't want other users in there. So it's got to be a downtime for your organization as well. Obviously not in the middle of a fundraiser.
Erica has just asked if you can select these errors and just see which ones they are, or do you have to run a report? I don't think this is selectable text, is it?
No. So we just did screenshots. So maybe that's what you could just do, a screenshot of the errors, or you can always go back and run the health check again and see what the errors were.
But I think Erica, in order to find, if you want to find these 153 household objects with no contacts, you will have to do some kind of report or whatever to find them, to find what what it is you're going to delete. Yes, unfortunately, you can't just click straight to them.
Right. No, you're right. Okay. So I'm assuming the next one is sandboxes, right?
Yeah. So So, and it's interesting because we've had a few questions about it, haven't we?
We have, yeah, I know. And you know what? I'm so glad. Actually, I have to say I'm very glad you're thinking about sandboxes because it is a good way to test your data. And in any rate, like whatever you're doing with Salesforce, adding a new app that you're not sure whether you want to use, Sandbox is wonderful. And I don't know, probably all of you don't know this, but as a nonprofit, you get these for free. The for-profit sector and Enterprise Edition does not provide sandboxes. So we're super lucky as nonprofits to even get the sandboxes we do have. There are a couple options for paid versions, full sandboxes, all of your data and all of your objects. And then you can also get a partial sandbox, which is limited data in selected objects. So, you could say, I just want my data from contacts accounts and household, I'm not interested in anything else, or contacts, accounts, opportunities, and household, or whatever it is that you want to test, and then you'll get a partial sandbox. And as Caroline informed me, you buy these for the full time of contract. So it's not like you can say, oh, I just want a partial sandbox for a month, or I want a partial sandbox for a week, or I want a full sandbox for 6 months.
Which is the unfortunate thing. Yes. So I also was doing a little, because they're a bit cagey about how much they cost. I think based on some research I've done, that a full sandbox would be approximately $10 per user per month. And even if you're not actually paying for any user licenses, they will still base it on how many users you have. So, even if you only have 4 Salesforce users, you're going to it'll be based on the users. And yeah, Tracy, you're absolutely right. You need to think about how the timing works on this. Yes. Because they do you do buy the sandbox and basically until your contract is renewed, and even if you're not actually buying any user licenses, you will still have a contract renewal date. You just may not know when it is, and you'll still have to talk to your account executive about it. But yes, the ideal is that you want to buy it a month before your contract renewal date happens. Unfortunately, you might be in the situation of some of my clients, which is that their contract has just renewed, in which case if they were to buy a full data sandbox now, they would be buying it for a whole year. And the partial data sandbox would be approximately $7 per user per month.
Those prices. The other option is to actually take the sandboxes you do have available to you, export some sample data, maybe using a report, and then import that data using Apsona or Data Loader. You don't need all of your data, but if you can get a representative sample of your data, then you can import that into the sandbox that you have. Basically, the affected objects, as Caroline has here, accounts, contacts, and opportunities.
Yeah. Yes. So Jerry asked that are we implying that you create the sandbox and then you put some data into it? And I think yes, if you don't want to pay for a full sandbox, then that's probably the way to do it. And I don't think it matters how big the sample is. It could be maybe 20 to 30 contacts, or it could be 50, or it could be 100. I think you just want it to be representative. So maybe you might want to pull a report, for example, that is all of your donors from this year, or all of your donors from the last 6 months, and just import them, for example. Because if you remember back to what we were talking about before, you're doing a shift that goes. You're shifting your accounts around.
All right. I don't know, Caroline, are you there?
Yeah. That's interesting, because people are saying that they can hear you, but not me.
Sorry. Because it got very quiet all of a sudden, and I thought, uh-oh, either I hung up or Caroline's gone. Okay, good. Thanks, Beth. All right.
I can hear both of you.
So,
okay.
So I think, so the point is that you want to take a sandbox that you already, that's basically, it's free, and so then you can take your existing data and import that into the sandbox. And again, you don't need all of your data. You can take a sampling of your data, and then you can import that in and then do the conversion in your sandbox, because that's the way for you to test it out without causing any problems in production. And that, again, for organizations that are heavily using Salesforce, you really don't want to cause problems with production. If it's a small, there's only 2 of us that are using Salesforce in our organization because we're small. Maybe, you do your testing in the sandbox, you add some of your own, to hand enter in some data, do the conversion, and then go into Salesforce and do your upgrade, the production version.
And I think, as I was saying, and some people heard me and not others, is that I was saying you don't need to put all of your data in. You know, it may be that 20 or 30 contacts are enough, maybe 100. One of the suggestions I was starting to say was perhaps you could run a report of maybe all your donors in something like the last 6 months, and put the donations in the last 6 months, put them into the sandbox and do it, or the last 3 months. Right. It kind of depends a bit how busy you are. Remember, what you're doing is you're changing the type of account, and the opportunities are related to the account. So the things that are going to get affected here are account and donations. And what you want to test is that when you've done the conversion, that the donations will be, you know, if your donations have been linked to a one-to-one account before, you want to make sure that they are then with the appropriate household account. So that's going to be where the impact is. There should be absolutely no impact on campaigns. There should be absolutely no impact on volunteers. Things that only reference the contact object should be absolutely fine. The main one that you're going to be worried about here is donations, because they are directly linked to your account object, not to your contact.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and we had a conversation yesterday about cases, didn't we? And decided that actually cases are probably fine, because it's a look. Because again, they're usually associated with a contact, and it's just a look up to an account. Yeah, so opportunities is the key one.
Yes, opportunities is the big one. That's true. Okay, so any other questions about Sandbox? Because I know you all were typing in questions about it. I want to make sure that we got everything with that. It is important, and I highly recommend you guys get comfortable with them as admins of your instance, to just use sandboxes regularly to test and try and practice different things. Because the for-profit sector is jealous we even get any.
I mean, it's interesting. Yes, David does rock. It's interesting. Yes, you're right that David is very proud of the fact that he could actually make the necessary modifications to both volunteers and auctions while he was building Nonprofit Starter Pack 3. The other ones that to be aware of are if you have a payment processor like IATS or Brickwork or Click and Pledge. They are both. I think that the answer with both apps is that yes, they'll work, but you may need to wait until the next upgrade, because the next version of both of those apps will have full support for Nonprofit Starter Pack 3. Carly has asked a really interesting question about NGO Connect. And if you're considering NGO Connect, do I upgrade to Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 and then get NGO Connect? So one of the things about the Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 is that one of the reasons why the household account model has now become the default is because it also is essentially the same account model that NGO Connect uses. So it's bringing the foundation, the products that are supported by the foundation, or the packages that are supported by the foundation, closer together. It's not the only reason, but it is one of them. So yes, if you are considering that you may at some point wish to use NGO Connect, then upgrading to Nonprofit Starter Pack 3 and converting to the household account model is probably a good path to take, because it will get you closer to where you want to be to then eventually use NGO Connect. Do you agree with that, Ashima?
Yeah, and also I think, there's not a simple path. Like if you're thinking I'm going to do NGO Connect in the next 2 months, then I would say hold off on upgrading, because there's no direct path into NGO Connect from Nonprofit Starter Pack. So in other words, it's not like, I click a switch and I'm automatically to NGO Connect. It takes work to get the data ported over, because it's still not they haven't quite figured that piece out yet. How do I get the data moved over? So regardless, you're going to end up having to do some manipulation. But over time, like if you're saying, oh, you know what, in 2 years maybe I'll move to NGO Connect, absolutely get upgraded to 3.0 household account model. So I think the time span too is relevant for you. If you're going to do it right away, just go to NGO Connect. If you're saying I want to wait, a year or two, then yes, upgrade to 3 and the household account model. Caroline's spot on there.
Yeah, I think, that's good advice. Sound advice, Ashima. And there are also some features like the seasonal addresses and things like that, which are, there are versions of that in NGO Connect. So if you get used to how those work, you'll find the transition easier.
Exactly. Yep. Any other questions about sandboxes, or I want to make sure we catch all of your questions? I think we got them all. I'm scrolling back up.
So for the benefit of the recording and the slides, yes, here are the resources. A link to the documentation, specific link to the section that deals with the migration to the household account model, because that does seem to be in a slightly different place, and the link to the upgrade workbook. And because these links are actually so useful, we'll send them to you separately with the recording, so you can just click straight to them. And
I think we've got all your questions.
Yeah, and you can also contact us. And should we show our next slide, and then we can come back if anybody else has any more questions?
Yes. Yep. So these are the next workshops that we have coming up. On November 6th, we're going to do creating practical reports to measure fundraising efforts. The goal, so just so you know, the goal of all of these workshops that Caroline and I are doing is to get you up and running as quick as possible. So the idea is, how can I, create real reports? And so we're going to go over that. And if there are report questions that come up while the session is going, we encourage that dialogue, definitely. I think the one I'm most excited about is I inherited the Salesforce instance, now what? Because so many people come to me saying, I need help coaching, show me how to do this. And it seems to be the same things over and over again. So we really want to dive into that and be able to explain things you should look at, things you should try and do. And then, of course, advanced reporting. We're going to really dive into more of how to pull data out. These are all going to get switched over. Well, creating practical reports, measuring fundraising efforts, and advanced reporting, we're going to really hone in on the version 3.0, although we'll bring up things that are related to one-to-one and individual, but we're likely going to be moving more into the household account model. We'll kind of, this is sort of an awkward time, there's all this.
We've had to rewrite it, haven't we?
Yes, we have to rewrite it, right, exactly. We need to rewrite, but we also need to recognize that some of you are still going to stick with the existing household model you have, or account model you have, and we don't want to, lose that ability for you to learn as well. So we're going to be doing fancy steps through that.
and I'm sure that everyone who's on this call knows all about their Salesforce instance. But please, if you have friends who are maybe new at an organization and kind of don't really know where to start, I think what we have in mind here is that you are in a new position with an organization that has been using Salesforce for some time, but maybe not very effectively. And this is to help you try and figure out, well, what have I got here? What's installed, what packages, what customization has been done. They will be recorded, and all the registration details are on Ashima's website.
Yep. Yeah, and they'll be recorded and shared with those that attended the session. So we aren't going to make those available because those are a fee for those sessions. It's not very expensive, but it's still a fee. So we keep that just for the attendees. This one, however, being free, and any of the other free ones we offer, those we'll make available widely through the Power of Us Hub, as well as through databasesherpa.com website. All right, so should we stop the recording then, Caroline, and we can answer questions? Or any questions people have?
Looks like great. Okay, well, thank you everybody very much for attending, and I hope that this was useful information. Unfortunately, being a Mac person, I have to do a whole load of recording conversions, so it probably won't get to you until tomorrow, but we'll send out both the recording and the links.
Yeah. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your morning/afternoon wherever you are.